Discipline, whether we're talking about imposing it on others or practicing it ourselves, seems like such a fundamental part of any society that we don't often ask what it even is or where it comes from. But why do we value discipline? And who decides what counts as disciplined behavior anyway? In this video, we'll explore the origins and evolution of discipline as a concept from ancient philosophy to modern social theory. We'll consider some of the key texts and thinkers that have shaped our understanding of discipline, including Stoicism, Christianity, Kant, Rousseau, and Foucault. Let's start with the classical and religious roots of discipline. One of the earliest and most influential accounts of discipline can be found in the philosophy of the Stoics, particularly in the works of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. Now, the Stoics were a group of Hellenistic philosophers who flourished in ancient Greece and Rome around the 3rd century BC to the 3rd century AD. Their teachings centered on ideas like virtue, indifference to external things, and living in harmony with nature and reason. And central to their philosophy was the idea of discipline as an internal practice. For the Stoics, discipline wasn't something that was imposed externally or dictated by society. It was something that each individual had to cultivate for themselves. It was a rigorous process of self-examination, self-control, and moral fortitude aimed at aligning oneself with the rational order of the cosmos. Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher, stressed the importance of self-discipline in overcoming adversity and achieving inner freedom. In his discourses, he famously said, "It's not events that upset us, but our judgments about those events." What he means by this is that it's not what happens to us that causes distress, but rather our interpretation and reaction to those events. Thus, discipline for the Stoics involves training our minds to respond to external events in a virtuous and equanimous way. They believed that by cultivating discipline, one could attain a state of eudaimonia, often translated as happiness or well-being, but which really refers to a state of flourishing or living virtuously in accordance with nature. This involved not just intellectual assent to Stoic ideas, but a constant struggle to put them into practice in everyday life. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, elaborated on these themes in his personal philosophical journal, Meditations. Here he grappled with issues of self-discipline, duty, and the pursuit of virtue in the midst of the challenges and temptations of imperial power. For Marcus Aurelius, being disciplined meant continually striving to live according to the principles of wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation, even when faced with the pressures and distractions of public life. So for the Stoics, the concept of discipline was deeply rooted in their broader philosophical system. It wasn't a separate or isolated idea, but rather an integral part of their understanding of how to live a good and meaningful life. They saw discipline as a means to achieve inner freedom and wisdom, not as a way of conforming to external rules or expectations. However, the concept of discipline took on a different turn in Christian thought, particularly in the writings of St. Augustine. In his work, Confessions, Augustine grappled with issues of desire, sin, and the quest for spiritual salvation. For Augustine, discipline involved taming the unruly desires of the flesh and aligning the will with divine law. In his view, humans had a natural inclination towards sin and self-indulgence, and overcoming this inclination required a kind of ascetical discipline. He emphasized the need for self-control and mortification of the senses as a means to purify the soul and attain a closer relationship with God. Augustine's ideas had a profound impact on the development of Western asceticism and monasticism. Thinkers like Bruno Totalis and Thomas Aquinas built upon his ideas, emphasizing the role of discipline in achieving spiritual perfection. The rise of monastic orders, such as the Benedictines, showcased a commitment to disciplined life as a path to salvation, Figures like Saint Benedict formulated rules or orders that emphasized prayer, manual labor, and strict obedience as ways to cultivate piety and self-mastery. But perhaps the most significant institutionalization of discipline came with the emergence of Christianity as a dominant religion in Europe. Think about the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages. Its hierarchical structure and emphasis on obedience to religious authority played a crucial role in shaping people's lives. Religious orders became centers of discipline, imposing strict regimes on monks and nuns to foster spiritual growth and detachment from worldly pleasures. In the modern era, the concept of discipline started to be reframed in new and interesting ways. Let's look at two prominent figures who significantly shaped our understanding of discipline in the Enlightenment period. First, Immanuel Kant. For Kant, discipline was closely tied to the idea of autonomy and the ability to govern oneself according to universal moral principles. In his groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, he argued that true freedom could only be achieved through self-discipline. That is because he believed that our inclinations and desires often lead us astray from what is morally right. So according to Kant, we must discipline ourselves to align our actions with duty and the categorical imperative. This involves overcoming our selfish impulses and acting in a way that respects the dignity and autonomy of others. In essence, for Kant, discipline is a cornerstone of moral autonomy. It enables us to transcend our immediate desires and act in accordance with universal moral laws, thereby becoming truly free agents. Then there's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In his treatise Émile, or On Education, Rousseau offered a more ambivalent perspective on discipline. He criticized traditional methods of education which relied on punishment and external rewards as a means of shaping children's behavior. Rousseau believed that such authoritarian approaches corrupted children's natural goodness and alienated them from themselves and their environment. Instead, he advocated for a more natural and child-centered approach to education that nurtured children's innate curiosity and love for learning without resorting to harsh discipline. Rousseau argued that children should be allowed to follow their own interests and learn through their experiences in a supportive and non-coercive environment. He believed that this would foster autonomy, creativity, and a strong sense of morality. However, despite these criticisms of traditional discipline, Rousseau himself recognized the necessity of certain limits and guidance in the upbringing of children. He proposed a method of progressive and cooperative discipline where children are gradually introduced to societal norms and values through dialogue and shared experiences rather than through force or coercion. So in a nutshell, Kant saw discipline as essential for moral autonomy and living according to universal principles. Rousseau, on the other hand, viewed discipline with more skepticism, calling for a more natural and less coercive approach to education. Now let's jump into the most influential modern critique of discipline. Michel Foucault's work, particularly Discipline and Punish, offers a radical rethinking of the concept of discipline and its role in society. Published in 1975, this book revolutionized our understanding of how power operates in modern societies. For Foucault, discipline is not simply about self-improvement or moral education. It's a mechanism of power that regulates behavior and produces docile and obedient subjects. Let me explain. Foucault analyzes the emergence of modern disciplinary institutions like prisons, schools, and hospitals. These institutions, he argues, are designed to regulate and normalize behavior through a variety of techniques. They sort individuals into categories of normal and abnormal, desirable and undesirable, and they use surveillance, examination, and reward and punishment to shape behavior according to certain norms. One of the key concepts in Discipline and Punish is the panopticon, a type of prison design that Foucault uses as a metaphor for the operation of disciplinary power. The The panopticon is a circular prison layout in which the guards in the central tower can observe all the cells, but the inmates cannot see the guards. This creates a situation in which the inmates are constantly aware they might be watched, which leads them to self-discipline and self-surveillance. In Foucault's view, the panopticon symbolizes the way disciplinary power permeates modern institutions. It's not a visible or direct form of power, but operates through the constant threat of surveillance and normalization. The effect of discipline, according to Foucault, is to produce docile bodies and minds that are self-regulating and obedient to the demands of society. This process of normalization and obedience, however, comes at a cost. Foucault recognizes that disciplinary power tends to marginalize and punish those who deviate from the norm, often labeling them as abnormal or criminal. This raises important ethical questions about the limits of disciplinary power and the potential for abuse. By uncovering the mechanisms of disciplinary power, Foucault calls for a critical examination of how knowledge and power intersect in the production of social norms and the construction of normality and abnormality. And those are some of the key historical perspectives on the philosophy of discipline. Do you want to know more about any of these thinkers or concepts? Let me know in the comments below. I can do more videos on specific topics if you guys are interested. Anyway, thanks so much for watching and let me know what you think.